Coming up tonight on Fifth Third Business Beat, a debate is brewing in Green Hills over whether pieces of the past should be part of that village's future. Cincinnati's largest independent advertising agency moves forward with a new strategic plan. A new book details what Fisher Homes officials say was the motive behind an immigration raid on their work sites. Little Kings is back and going after a bigger beer market. Senior staff reporter of the Business Courier Dan Monk discusses the labor market in Cincinnati. Macy's executive Amy Hansen shares what she's learned in her 25-year career with that retail giant. Paycor CEO Bob Coughlin talks to Crystal Faulkner about the importance of volunteer work for employees. Valerie Newell with River Point Capital Management discusses investments in the stock market in this week's Economic Beat. Experts at Cincinnati Bell explain how smartphones can change the way we do business. And John Bauman, CEO of Ampac Packaging, is Doug Bolton's guest on this week's Publishers Beat.
Fifth Third Business Beat is brought to you in part by Fifth Third Bank and Cincinnati Bell.
Hello, I'm Brian Patrick. Welcome to Fifth Third Business Beat for Friday, May 8th, 2009. On page one of the Business Courier this week, the debate over preservation or demolition in Green Hills. There's an ongoing local government initiative to demolish some of the buildings that have fallen into disrepair in Green Hills. The buildings were built as part of FDR's New Deal to provide construction work for the unemployed during the Depression. Preservationists want to get National Historic Landmark status for the village. They argue tearing down the old buildings hurts its historic integrity.
We're trying to encourage them to restore these buildings and see them as an asset and court the kind of folks who would like to live in them.
Some current and former officials argue some of the buildings are in such bad shape they have to come down to make room for development that will inject new life into the community. Cincinnati's largest independent advertising agency has a new strategic plan and some new clients. Northlick is in good shape and regaining its momentum after losing the Ohio Tobacco Prevention Foundation as a client last year. Northlick managed the foundation's anti-smoking campaign, and when it was liquidated by the state of Ohio, Northlick was forced to lay off some employees. The agency's owner says it's regrouped and is coming on strong.
We've reorganized our agency into villages, client-centric villages, so that the big idea is at the center of our thinking. And all of our folks, creatives, media, account folks, strategists, all work and live together.
Northlick picked up the Ohio Lottery as a client last month and regained Cincinnati Bell's media buying work, which had been lost to a firm in Toronto. A new book reveals what Fisher Homes CEO Henry Fisher says was the motive behind government raids on some of his work sites 3 years ago. 76 undocumented workers were arrested, and 4 Fisher construction supervisors were charged with aiding, abetting, and harboring illegal aliens. All charges against Fisher employees were eventually dropped, though some subcontractors and illegal workers were convicted. The book, titled No Crime But Prejudice, Fisher Homes, the Immigration Fiasco, and Extrajudicial Prosecution, was written by journalist and consultant John Entine. For Fisher, the story is about the power the federal government wielded in a case he says was based on politics and not evidence. Fisher Homes was posting record sales at the time of the raids, but sales dropped 70% after the arrests.
What happened to us and our 6 associates was entirely wrong, inappropriate, and we certainly wouldn't want that to happen to anyone else. And if we can further and improve the system in our country, then that's what we hope to accomplish out of this.
Fisher Homes says it never has hired illegal workers. The U.S. Attorney's Office won't comment on the investigation. That beer in the little green bottles is making a comeback. Sales of Little Kings Cream Ale are up 300% since it was acquired by Greg Hardman, the CEO of Christian Moerlein. It's part of his Hudepohl Schaenling portfolio of classic Cincinnati beer brands. Little Kings is a $2 million business that Hardman hopes to grow to $6 million by the end of the year.
And we've spent approximately the last 4 months repositioning and redesigning the brand to bring back a new classic look to the brand. We've also introduced a 12-pack package, all in the 7-ounce bottle, and to our knowledge, it's the first 7-ounce 12-pack in the industry today.
The beer was first introduced in 1958 as Shanling Cream Ale, and the Shanling name is being put back in its prominent place on the label. Let's go back to the front page of the Business Courier this week, a story by senior reporter Dan Monk on the labor market in Cincinnati. A lot of people looking for jobs. Dan, how bad is it? What are the numbers?
It's pretty ugly right now. There's a big disparity in the number of people looking versus the number of jobs being offered. There's a company called the Conference Board does a monthly survey of the labor market nationally, and then it studies various cities. Their latest numbers on Cincinnati from March indicate there are something like 5 times as many job seekers as there are positions being advertised online. And Cincinnati actually has worse numbers than Cleveland in this regard, and a lot of people wouldn't expect that.
Ouch. That means, some fields I'm sure are hit worse than others. Which are the ones that are suffering the most?
Architecture, construction, engineering, materials handling, all of those fields are relatively weak right now. This is according to another survey by Monster.com. They do a monthly employment index, and those are the categories that have gotten weak in the last year and are weaker than the rest of the market. Healthcare and information technology are relatively strong.
So the employers that are posting openings, I'll bet they're getting flooded with resumes.
We talked to a couple of human resources folks this week, people who've been in the market for 10 years, and they say they have never seen a market like this with so many candidates applying for so few jobs. And they're saying that they're seeing somewhere between 100 and 400 resumes for some of the better jobs that they're posting. And these people, they'll only interview 5 or 10 people. They'll talk to them on the phone and then call 3 or so in for a face-to-face interview. So not only is it hard to get a job, but it's hard to get an interview in this market.
But there's got to be a bright side now for employers. I mean, they would get to be pretty choosy about who they're hiring.
Yeah, a lot of the people we talk to who are looking for jobs say that employers are getting very picky. If you don't match the skill set that they're advertising, you don't get called back. And a lot of them have adjusted downward their salary expectations. And the corporate recruiters we've talked to say the same thing. They are being more picky. They're not calling everybody in for an interview. They can't. They're getting 100 to 300 resumes for some of these jobs. And they're having it's basically a buyer's market right now, the employers being the buyer.
So as employers have an advantage, how are the employees coping who are facing this situation?
Well, there's an interesting phenomenon going on right now. Some of the folks we talk to who are looking for jobs say they're spending a lot of time at Starbucks and Panera stores. Apparently the Montgomery Road Panera is a hot spot for people looking for jobs, and they'll bring their laptops in, their cell phones, and they'll make their email connections and share information, share words of encouragement. Apparently the Hyde Park Starbucks, another good place.
All right, a lot of great information. Thank you, Dan. Read Dan Monk's story on the front page of this week's Business Courier. Here's the Courier Greater Cincinnati Stock Index, tracking the performance of about 40 local stocks compared with the broader market using the Dow Jones Wilshire 5000 Index. The market soared last week. The local index jumped about 8%. The overall market gained around 6%.